I have so many more questions about the taillight, and it's due to recent testimony that's kind of convoluted the thing. So let's get into this. From the very beginning, there was essentially two stories. The prosecution said that Karen hit John with her SUV and that it completely destroyed her taillight. Now, there's these two horizontal lines, and then there's like what I'm going to call the triangle. Like there's this red triangle casing that's kind of on the corner. They claimed this entire section was destroyed. It was shattered and pieces went everywhere. The defense claims that Karen's taillight was cracked the next morning at 5:07 a.m. There's ring video. Here's a still from it. When Karen backed out of the garage and hit John's parked SUV. They're saying that's when the damage to the taillight happened. Karen, Jen McCabe, Carrie Roberts, and a Dighton police officer, all four of them have in their reports and in their testimony that they saw the taillight and that it was cracked. And then I think maybe it was amended a little tiny bit to say if there were pieces missing, there was just a couple of little ones, right? But it was most, they would describe it as cracked. And that was the story. Now, if you listen closely in Jen McCabe's testimony the other day, and I made a video, it's this one, go back and watch it. She said 4 new things that hadn't been said before that happened in those phone calls. It's always been, her testimony's always kind of been where Karen calls and is like, Jen, John's missing, and then kind of hangs up. Never really says anything of substance in those phone calls. But now the story's changed. Jen says during call number 1 that Karen said, we had an argument and I left him at Waterfall. The second call, she says something else, but she says, and my taillight is broken. Now, by throwing that in, Jen is setting the stage that Karen's taillight, and Karen knew her taillight was broken before she pulled out of John's garage that morning. So that's what Jen McCabe is trying to establish, is that it had to have happened the night before because Karen hasn't left the house yet. So that cracked on John's car thing couldn't have happened. She's trying to establish an earlier time frame. And to add to it, the fourth thing she mentions is that Karen shows up, they go to leave, and Matt McCabe conveniently yells, you can't go out in this blizzard with that broken taillight. So they're trying to establish that both Jen and Matt knew that Karen had confessed to them before the 5:07 ring video that her taillight was already broken. So that's what they're trying to establish. But naturally, I have questions. When she came to Jen's house, Jen and Karen got into Karen's car with Carrie following them, and they drove back to John's house. It's snowing, it's very dark. If this was the condition of the taillight from the night before, if there was no casing on it whatsoever, and I don't need to do Auto Mechanics 101, but let's just face it, the red plastic is what makes the light red. Otherwise, it's a white light bulb. So as they're driving along, Carrie would have seen a white light, and anytime they applied the brakes, Carrie would have seen a bright white light. I don't know if she would have noticed, but I think if they're the only 2 cars on the road and they're driving very slow and she's right behind them, she might have noticed as they were turning and going like this, she might have noticed that it was basically all white on the back of the car, because that's a pretty substantial chunk to be missing. When they arrived at John's house, it was Karen's vehicle first in the driveway and then Carrie's vehicle behind her. And this is where they all testified that at one point, either before they went in or when they came out, Karen took the time to show them, and they testified that it was just cracked. But if that much was missing, neither of those women would have described that as cracked. From the very beginning, in the very first police statement, in the very first grand jury, in the first trial, they would have said the taillight was completely gone. The triangle was missing. It was nothing but white. They would have described it differently than cracked. If a Dighton officer saw this, he would absolutely get up on the stand and say, it was completely gone. All I saw was white. There was no red left on that taillight. It was broken 100%. That's how he would have described it. They left Karen's car in John's driveway, and they took Carrie's car to go around looking for John. When they came back to 34 Fairview, in the chaos of the moment, let's pretend for a second that multiple people heard Karen say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. At some point, both Carrie and Jen would have said, officer, I need to talk to you, because she's running around saying she hit him, and this morning she showed us her taillight, and her taillight's completely gone. it's highly possible she might have hit him. You might need to look into this. Go to John O'Keefe's house right now and go photograph her car because the entire taillight is missing. Right? They would have said something. They would have done something. If she's confessing, why wouldn't they have said, oh my God, someone needs to take her down to the station and question her? And by the way, if any of those officers heard her say, I hit him, they would have brought her in anyway, just to clarify the story, because you don't get to confess and then just drive away. If that entire taillight, again, had been completely blown out, you would have seen this as Karen was driving home at night. The police would have pulled out every single stop to get every single Ring video. We wouldn't have the time missing on the public library video. They would have found every ATM, every traffic camera. They would have gone door to door to get every Ring camera to show every step of the way. Here it is from this angle, here it is from this angle, here it is from this angle. The red is completely missing. See how the entire taillight is white. But instead, what we have is we have these different vantage points where it shows, even though supposedly the entire triangle is missing, you still see different shots and angles and videos and photos of there being red. Like, for example, this is a still shot from as Karen was pulling out of the driveway that morning. This is 5:07 as she's pulling out. But notice when she's hitting John's car, right? She's applying the brakes. She's hit and she's applying the brakes. Look how much red is on that side of the car. If there was no taillight at all, if there was no red, you would see white. The triangle is what you would see. The triangle is what wraps around the side of the vehicle. On that side of the vehicle, you would only see white on this side of the vehicle. You wouldn't see any red over here because the red's on the back of the car. And my favorite part is when they took the jury on the visit to 34 Fairview, they parked Karen's car out there and they explained to them, we've removed the entire casing. Like, this is what the jury saw. Why? I think the reason they did this is because if you left it like this, the jury would think the same thing I'm thinking. That's very obvious breakage, and every single person would have described it that way. No one would have described this as a crack, and they would have realized that everywhere that car went, every time that car was driven, anytime the lights were on or the brake was applied, it would just be a white light. Plus, I think other people mentioned this. I don't know if it was maybe Boozy Beauty mentioned this. There would be salt and crud and muck inside the casing around the light bulb. It would like splash in there. So they had to take the whole thing off because the jury would have asked those questions. Never mind that they searched the scene in the morning and found no red taillight. They searched the scene later, mid-morning, an entire different group of cops came in, and those are the ones with the leaf blower who managed to find a crystal clear bar glass but couldn't find a single piece of red. Not a single piece of red taillight was found until after 5:30 that night, after Karen's car had already been confiscated and was sitting in the Canton PD garage. Only then did they start finding pieces of taillight. And only then did they keep driving by the house and found them for a couple weeks after, and it was always Proctor or Buchanan. They always kept finding taillight.